Many of us are walking around today with no idea who we really are or what we want to do with our lives. Today, I'm going to outline the steps that I personally took in order to start meeting myself and getting a grip on who I actually am. So let's define the problem. If you envision yourself as a surface, where each peak and valley and edge is an aspect of who you are, many of us are living lives like this, where there's a lot of space between you in red, who you actually are, and you prime in blue, which is who you go about your day as, who you kind of pretend to be in the real world. This space can come from a few key places, the first of which I'm going to discuss are your formative experiences and your traumas. Now, trauma can either pull you away from or really hyper-exaggerate certain aspects of your personality. For example, let's take a child who, let's say, drove by a really bad car accident and saw the wreckage. For one of them, it might traumatize them and scare them away from driving and away from cars and give them this fear. It would traumatize them. But for the other child, it would ignite a passion in medicine because they focused on the heroic EMTs that rushed in and saved the people that were involved. Two different people can go through the same thing and get an entirely different outcome. One of them gets an important formative experience, and the other one gets a terrible trauma. So it's your responsibility to look within yourself and really think about how the events in your life interacted with who you are to produce the effects that they had. The second place that a lot of this space or inauthenticity is coming from is from content and social osmosis. Most of who you are is kind of layered on throughout your life without you really realizing it. What your parents believed, what your friends believed, and nowadays what the people on the internet that you watch and you like and you follow believe are all influencing who you are. They are programming beliefs and programming opinions into your brain without you even realizing it. These things can be aligned with who you actually are. Like, you may have found a friend or a content creator or whatever it is that actually shares your beliefs, but you got to be really careful as to whether you're just accepting something and putting it into your brain because a person you liked said it. On the flip side, you also got to be careful that you're not just reacting against the beliefs of someone that you don't like. So this process of individuation, of becoming who you are, is a process of trying to remove that space, of trying to remove the authenticity between who you are actually and who you go about your day as. So how do we do this? Step one is to disconnect. Especially if you are a sensitive person, outside stimuli is going to completely drown out your sense of your internal proclivities. Consuming the opinions of others via content or books, podcasts, movies, whatever, is going to leave you blind to yourself because there's just going to be too much noise going on inside for you to hear those subtle signals from your body. Now, it's important to note that this is not monk mode. Disconnecting does not mean to completely isolate yourself from all people for long periods of time. Think of this as wizard mode, where between short, intentional periods of isolation and introspection, you come back to your friends, back to your family, back to society with the things that you've learned and as a better person. Throughout all of this, you should be connecting with nature ideally, but the important part is to stop consuming content. Now, step two is to break down. Once you've removed the noise from your external environment, it's time to start digging in, to break down walls, to loosen and peel away the outer constructed, programmed layers of your ego to reveal the inner structure, to remove the false opinions and beliefs that were put into your mind without you even realizing it. A quote that I really like is, "The journey is not about becoming anything. It is about unbecoming everything that is not really you." So if you're trying to go down the path of individuation, of figuring out who you actually are, what you want to do with your life, if you're trying to heal from trauma, if you're trying to go down a spiritual path, this is an essential portion. So how do we do this? The key exercise in the process of breaking down is that of the internal audit. Everything happens for a reason in our internal environment. If you can point to an aspect of yourself or an opinion or a belief or an interest or whatever, it has a root cause. And building a full causal map between each of these aspects, where they came from and how they impact you now, is the key component to building a foundation of emotional intelligence that's going to allow you to heal and to grow. A straightforward and low-risk way of accomplishing this is to consistently meditate on your beliefs and opinions and emotions. You must be constantly asking yourself, why did I do that? Why do I feel this way? Do I really feel this way? Where did this opinion come from? And key, why would that person or that institution want me to believe this thing? This process is going to be hard. It's going to require a lot of time, a lot of dedication, and a lot of consciousness. You can be truly convinced that you believe something, and your mind will build this kind of deflection shield around it. Anytime that anything starts to threaten that in the eyes of your ego, it will direct your opinion to something else or conjure a really strong anger emotion is usually the one it chooses in order to avoid having its ideological structure threatened. That is why it's very important to be able to break down the defenses of the ego, hence the name of step 2, break down. In chaos magic, this is called entering a state of gnosis and can be done in many ways. The first of these ways is suffering. Now, we got to be a little careful with this one. I'm not encouraging you to hurt yourself or to do any damage to yourself, but at the end of the day, you do you. My personal way of inducing a Gnostic suffering is in the form of endurance exercise. If you have ever ran or hiked, 10, 15, 20 miles, you know how raw and open your mind feels at the end of that. Any other form of endurance cardio is also going to work, and this is also where yoga really shines. If you find a difficult yoga pose and are able to really sit with the discomfort in your body as you maintain it for a long period of time, that training of a single pointed focus and the ability to overcome the messages your body can send you is going to be a really potent spiritual exercise. The second primary way that I'm going to talk about to induce gnosis is that of fear. And this is one of my personal favorite methods. I like to do what I call athletic fear, which is I ski really crazy shit. I hike and scramble, which, is essentially kind of rock climbing, and then I rock climb. I have a fear of heights, and so when I do these things, it puts my body into a genuine state of fight or flight that I have to consciously overcome and continue to do the activity. Maintaining that calm focus while your body is in that state of fight or flight is a really powerful method for kind of clearing out the noise in your mind. If you can keep your body moving slowly and controlled while you're absolutely terrified, that is going to be really helpful when you need to peer past your ego. The third category of methods for entering a state of gnosis is what I'll just call spirituality. This is meditation, this is prayer, this is chanting and dance and ritual, which is really just taking all of these things that I've talked about before and sticking them together in a way that works for you. And then we have the catalysts. And this is where things start to get a little riskier. With all of these catalysts, they deserve respect, and some of them are frankly just not worth doing at all. One of those examples is sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is a very potent way to push yourself out into the spiritual realms. If you have a tendency towards psychosis, sleep deprivation is going to push you towards that, and it's just really bad for your brain and your health anyway, so don't do that. But some things that I would recommend are sensory deprivation, sensory overload. If you imagine like a tribal dance circle where there's drums and jingling and dancing and it's hot and smoky and all that stuff, that is the type of sensory overload that is going to push you into a altered state, essentially. There's also prolonged fasting, which again, be very careful with. There's solitude, there's cannabis, and psychedelics. Obviously, be careful with any of these because they really do work, especially the exogenous ones, sometimes more than you bargained for. If you're looking for a to-do here, I would really recommend creating a ritual, or if the word ritual scares you, create a protocol, same thing, that utilizes a combination of these methods that I've talked about before. Find what works for you to loosen your mind up and to lower your ego's defenses, and so that during your internal audit, you can really peer deeply into yourself and get clear insight. And again, this could take you months. This is something I have personally been working on for years, and especially in the age of information, it is something that is going to take lifelong maintenance. But eventually you will reach a point where you are confident that most of what you are thinking and believing on a day-to-day basis actually comes from you. And at that point, you will be ready for step 3. Now, step 3 is to explore. This is where you start looking at what you are as opposed to what you are not. And the best way to start this is by looking at your memories. This right here is the best $35-40 I've probably ever spent. It is a Leuchtturm 1917 A4, I don't know, the big one. And writing in it, filling up most of those pages by now, has allowed me to unearth and really mull over a lot of memories that I really had no access to before I started the journaling process. Some good questions to ask are, what made you excited when you were a kid? What made you angry when you were a kid? What were you passionate about? What were you afraid of? All of these questions can really start to help you discover the trends that become the outline of the shape of who you are. The next step of the exploration process is to meet the neighbors, or to engage in archetypal psychology. Engaging with the archetypes means that you begin to view yourself as a steward of a council as opposed to a unified individual. And as of making this video, this is where I am at. I am in the thick of isolating, identifying, and then communicating with different aspects of myself. What that looks like is, if I notice that I had a particularly strong emotional reaction to something, I notice that I judged someone, or that I got really excited about something, I write it down and I think about who or what aspect of me caused that or did that. The most recent voice that I've identified is what I've called in my notes in this discovery process the saboteur or the shithead, but what I've come to realize recently is really just adolescent me, a distilled version of who I was as a teenager. When agitated, this teenager version of me uses nihilism and cringe as a weapon to keep me from expressing myself and to keep me from working towards my goals. He convinces me that people are watching me and judging me and tells me that I should care about that for some reason. This character represents a wounded child that never really got to be a kid. A child that took on too much responsibility too early. A child that had expectations set far too high, mainly in his own head, and because in a variety of situations, that child was forced to lop off the goofy, giggly, happy expressions that every child deserves to experience. He was forced to develop this inner sense of cringe in order to avoid doing anything that was going to get him ostracized or bullied further. And so now, understandably, whenever this part of me raises its voice, it's a voice of, "That's stupid. Why are you trying so hard? You're embarrassing yourself." He revolts against all forms of structure and authority and discipline because those represent the oppressive aspects of adulthood that he had to take on far too early. So now, when that voice tells me that I should just go fuck off, watch YouTube, eat shitty food, not exercise because nothing matters anyway, I literally talk to him. Sometimes it's out loud. Something like, "Look, man, I get it. You know, I know where you're coming from. I know we've been working pretty hard lately. But if we don't work hard, then we are both going to be disappointed in how we turn out in 10 years. This weekend, we're going to go and have fun. We're going to go up to the mountains. We're going to get a little stoned and we're just going to play. We're just going to have fun and you can have your time then. When you actually listen to and acknowledge these voices, most of the time they will get quieter. They just want to be heard, they just want to be acknowledged, and they just want to be accepted. You don't have to go along with everything that they say, you just have to listen because they have a seat at the council. Throw in an activity that you plan just for them, something that you know they will enjoy, and you'll be surprised how quickly even the darkest and most destructive aspects of yourself become a positive symbiotic force in your mind. Someone that you can ask for an opinion, and someone whose judgment you can trust because they are getting what they need. That is what shadow work is. It took me a long time to figure out what the fuck people were talking about with integrating your shadow, but now I understand. It's looking at the conscious, autonomous creatures that live in you that you don't like. It's looking at the parts of you that want to hurt other people, that want to manipulate, that want to control, that want to deceive. It's looking at the cowardly, the weak, the lazy aspects of yourself and talking with them, understanding them, forming a relationship with them, figuring out what they need, and then incorporating their perspective into your life. Their voice becomes heard at the council. And by the way, if you are thinking to yourself or have ever thought to yourself, oh, I could never hurt anybody, that's only psychopaths and crazy people, you have no idea how wrong you are. If you look for any amount of time deep within yourself, you will see things that appall and horrify you. You will realize that the abyss is staring back, and it always has been. You may also get to the point where I'm at, which is feeling at times a little bit empty or fractured. There's so many disparate voices, there's so many perspectives I'm considering at the council that at times it's hard to know what I, as a unified self, actually want or how I'm really feeling. For a while, this did scare me because it was starting to feel like I am nothing, that there's really nothing at the core of this, but the pieces have started to fall into place. The council is beginning to unify a little bit around this core structure. There's just still a lot of work to do. It is worth it though. It is truly one of the most important things that you can do as an individual. It is worth it to know yourself deeply because that is a prerequisite to living your life fully. Most people live out their entire existence in the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg of their psyche. But all that stuff underneath doesn't go away just because you don't look at it. And so you end up living your life controlled by forces entirely out of your control that you don't understand at all, and you never get a full picture of who you actually are. Now, some parts of you aren't going to use language. They aren't going to be easily isolated or pinned down, or maybe your brain just doesn't work super well in that way. That's not how you conceptualize things. And you may need to give yourself a more subtle, more open, more nuanced avenue for communication. And for that, I would recommend art, music, and listening to your intuition. Paint or draw or sing or play your feelings. Express yourself. Listen to the little voices and the little feelings that make up your intuition. And if something feels wrong, don't do it and try to figure out why it feels wrong to you. This exploration process is another stage that is going to involve work throughout your lifetime. But once you've spent enough time here, you'll begin to see the rough shape of your being, where all the different characters and impulses and feelings and memories start to coalesce around this core. And once you can see this core, you can start to layer things back on. And that brings us to step 4, which is to rebuild. As the dust settles, you get to decide where it lands. And this section is going to be the shortest of the video because frankly, I am still mainly in steps 2 and 3. But steps 1 through 3 help you lay it all out on the table. You get to see all the members of the council. You get to build that causal map that tells you the story of who you are and where you came from. And so with that, what aspects of yourself do you want to accentuate? Which aspects do you want to soften? Where is it most valuable to you to be the truest to your being? Whose voices do you want to come to the forefront, and during what situations do you want them to have that voice? What feels authentic to you, and how can you structure your environment and your life to support that? What does each character in you need? And can you build a life that satisfies each individual part of you to the degree that you'd like? The purpose of life, as far as I can tell, is to live it, and to live it fully. And I think in order to do that, you have to form a deep and intimate relationship with your own psyche. And that is the point of this video. By fully integrating the sub and the unconscious aspects of your psyche into your own conscious awareness, what Carl Jung called the individuation process, you'll have the clarity to actually build the life you want to live, and then to live it fully. Thank you.